was a Mason. In the 7th degree, he says, the oath, I promise and swear I will not wrong this chapter of Royal Arch Masons. Later on, I further promise and swear I will not speak evil of a companion Royal Arch Mason behind his back nor before his face, but will apprise him of all approaching danger. And you'd better do it. You'd better do it. Because if you don't, you have taken an oath also, to all which I do most solemnly and sincerely promise and swear with a firm and steadfast resolution to keep and perform the same without any equivocation, mental reservation, or self-evasion of mind in me whatever, binding myself under no less penalty than have my skull smote off and my brains exposed to the scorching rays of the meridian sun, should I knowingly or willfully violate or transgress any part of this my solemn oath or obligation of a Royal Arch Mason. So help me God, what God is not our God, and keep me steadfast in the due performance of the same. You know, it's mind-boggling to me that these guys can come up to anybody and say, I am a Christian. How can you promise to lie? How can you promise to protect another individual, whether he's lying, whether he's cheated, whether he's treasonous? How can you make these promises and call yourself a man of God? It's an absolute impossibility. And in the Royal Arch degree, what is promised is that you will bring in under you all of those who also are members of the lodge. So what happens here is, and this is what has happened to this country, the country was founded as a Masonic republic. Everyone who came into government for 200 years has been a Mason. If you look at the architectural scheme of Washington, D.C., which I'll show you later, it's laid out all in Masonic symbolism. For all of David Barton's wonderful tape on what a great Christian country we are, he's missed the complete boat. The ship went out and left him on shore. And someone told me recently the man won't even discuss Masonry. You can't talk about this country without bringing up Freemasonry. I used to say, you can't talk about politics unless you talk about the Council on Foreign Relations. Forget the Council on Foreign Relations. The Council on Foreign Relations is the hierarchy of international Freemasonry. That's all it is. CFR came out of the Royal International Institute, formed by who? Cecil Rhodes. Cecil Rhodes was a Mason. And if you track this thing back, I'll tell you where you end up. Gnosticism. Let's go back to year 300. What have you got? Arianism, yes? Those of you that remember that kind of stuff? Arianism. You know the story of Athanasius? Now, where does the church come into all of this? Why is this church a problem? This church is a problem, the Roman Catholic Church, specifically because it's mystical. It tries to influence people. It promotes structure and order. It has a priesthood. It promotes the Bible. It promotes a true reading of biblical history. It offers sacraments and rites of initiation which conflict totally and completely with those of Freemasonry. The Catholic Church, I'm sorry to have to enlighten some of my Protestant friends, is the complete antithesis of Freemasonry. Now, being that that is so, and I'll prove that more to you a little bit later because I'll read it right from their own words, can you understand that there might be a need to infiltrate this church? Because we have in their own writings that they hate the fact that there are hundreds, thousands of priests, bishops, nuns, cardinals, and lay people who at a moment's notice are willing to lay down their lives for the Pope and for the Lord. So what are you going to do with millions of people? Today you've got approximately 700 million Catholics running around on the loose. That is a very, very, very powerful force of people, 700 million people. Well, a man named Bernard Fay told us that the church has been infiltrated by Freemasons for a long time. In 1723, the Constitutions of the Freemasons, says Fay, spoke of the Brotherhood as having its own Catholic religion. By the way, another aside, when a Freemason named Calles, C-A-L-L-E-S, took over the Catholic Church in Mexico, he thereafter, in a Spanish name, called his church, which he had taken over, the Catholic Church of Mexico. You think the Mexicans know that? No. So when they see the Catholic Church doing crazy things, do they realize that Calles has now put all of his own people in as priests and brothers and cardinals, a la the KGB did in the Soviet Union, in the Greek Orthodox Church? Toward the middle of the 18th century, says Fay, Europe basked in the light of a thriving Freemasonry. Masons were to be found everywhere. Fay says great numbers of them were to be found in the French lodges of the 18th century. He says there was no organized opposition on the part of the French church against Freemasonry. From 1778 to 1790, French Freemasonry could be detected everywhere. In the Parliament, in the army, in the monasteries, in the schools were found members of the lodges, and the clergy, he said, did not remain behind. In Fee Camp, there was a lodge entirely composed of monks, get this, Brother Michael, of the nearby Benedictine monastery. We've got to keep our eye on you guys. The Lodge des Neuf Sœurs, 9 sisters, numbered 13 priests amongst its brethren, and 27 other lodges had priests, get this, as worshipful masters. However, the leadership and high functions generally remained in the hands of the high nobility. By that time, the nobles of Europe had become Masons themselves. So, nothing new regarding that. Now, do we have current evidence that a similar thing has happened today? Yes, we do. I have a list here of a number of archbishops, cardinals, and monsignors, prelates, priests, who are, this list goes back to 57, 60s, 70s, and I have another list here of Masons in the Catholic Church. I won't give the names, but let's go through some of the positions. These aren't low-level working agricultural positions, you know. Secretary of State, Prefect of the Sacred Congregation of Public Affairs. Member of the Pontifical Commission for the Revision of Canon Law. Secretary of State to Paul VI. Vicar General of the Diocese of Rome. Controller of all the clergy in the city. Member of the Sacred Congregation of Sacraments and of Divine Worship. Prefect of the Sacred Congregation of Bishops. Prelate of Honor and Secretary to Paul VI. After being excommunicated for heresy, this individual was reinstated by Cardinal Vio, who was the Secretary of State to Paul VI, and who was a member of the OTO, which was Aleister Crowley's secret society. Prefect of the Congregation for Catholic Education. You wonder why they're teaching sex ed in the Catholic schools? This is why. Consultant in the Sacred Congregation of the Propagation